episode 3, I demonstrated a different kind of lower third animation. The implementation of this animation was simplified by applying it to a nested timeline consisting of a fairly complex lower third. In this episode, I want to demonstrate the same kind of animation, but without the need for a nested timeline. Although the procedure is a bit more complicated than that described in episode 3, it will enable Movie Studio Platinum users who aren't able to use nested timelines to create this kind of animation. I've made a note of all the parameter values I've used in this lower third creation. I'll use these as an aid to save time. As usual, I have to point out that these values are for use with the PAL Full HD system. Right, let's get started. This lower third is constructed in a similar way to the one in the nested timeline of episode 3. The difference here is that the animation must be carried out on each event and synchronized so that each event moves in unison. At the moment, my project consists of the background video and 3 tracks. I've muted the video to avoid distraction, and I've renamed the tracks to reflect their events. I'm going to start by placing a solid colour event onto track 2. This will be the text background and will be green. As I normally do with lower thirds, I'll reduce the opacity to 0.5 and change the duration to 7 seconds. I'll now move it into approximately the right position for the video clip. I now need to scale down this event using track motion. So I'll place the playhead at the beginning of the event and open up the track motion for that track. So I need to leave the X coordinate at 0. The Y coordinate needs to be -400. The width needs to be 1120. And the height needs to be 0. I need this animation to last 10 frames. So I'll cursor forward 10 frames. And add a keyframe. I'll just open that out a little bit. At this keyframe, I'll change the height value to 110. Now I need to repeat that in reverse at the end of the event to create the outro. So I'll place the playhead at the end of the event and come back 1 frame. You should be familiar with my reason for doing that by now. Now I'll add a keyframe. At this keyframe, the parameter values should be the same as those at the first keyframe. So I will go back to the first keyframe and copy. I'll now come back 10 frames. and add a keyframe. Now this keyframe should have the same values as this keyframe. This completes the text background, so I'll check its animation. Next is the text background border. If you've watched some of my previous tutorials, you'll know that I like to place a border around my text background. That's my personal choice. You don't need to do this, but I think it just adds to the effect. For those of you who may be wondering why I don't use the Vegas border effect to achieve this, the answer is simple. If you apply the border effect to an event that'll be scaled using track motion, it'll be scaled as well. So, the way I scale the events for a lower third, the border will be thinner at the top and bottom than at the sides, so the border effect doesn't work correctly for my purposes. As a workaround, I have to place another solid colour event behind the text background. As usual, I'll choose white and place it on track 3. I'll now reduce this duration by dragging this to match the background and click this icon here to match the event length. Now this event needs scaling to produce the border, and there's a handy way of doing this scaling and the animations at the same time. I'll open track motion for the text background. I'll just open these out a bit. Now I can select all these keyframes by dragging over them. Right click on the first one and select copy. If I now open the track motion for the border event, place the playhead at the beginning of the event, add a keyframe, right click that keyframe and select paste. Now obviously these values will need changing to suit the border. I'm at the first keyframe, so I will change the width to 1145. Go to the second keyframe, change the width to 1145 and the height to 135. I'll copy this and paste it on the next keyframe. Go back to the first keyframe, copy that, go to the last keyframe and paste. I will now check the animation. Now at the moment you'll see that the semi-transparent text background is showing the white border event beneath it. I want the video to partly show through this instead. To do this I need to apply a bezier masking effect to the border event and size the mask to fit just over the background event. Open up the parameters for mask 1. Change width 1 to 0.976. And height 1 to 0.822. Put a check mark in invert and close the box down. So as you can see now, the black is partly showing through rather than the white. Lastly, it's the titles and text event, which goes on track 1. Match the event length. I now need to set this text event up. First change the font to Times New Roman and the size to 14. Now this time I'll leave the text colour as white, but I need an outline. I'll have an outline width of 5 and make the colour black. I like the border event. This event's animation needs to be the same as the background event. So I'll just do what I did before to copy the keyframe set. Now for this event, the first keyframe, the width should be 1920. At the second keyframe, the width should be 1920 and the height should be 1080. As before, I'll copy this and paste it on the third keyframe and copy the first keyframe, paste it on the last keyframe. We'll now check the animation. I have my preview quality at best full. I will put it at preview half so we get a smooth animation. Now go to the beginning of the timeline and unmute the video and play. Now once this lower third element is complete, all the events can be selected but not grouped. They can be replicated as many times on the timeline as you need for your project by control dragging, saying OK. And you can see that all the keyframe sequences are copied with it, and that will play as before. What I've just noticed is I forgot to put the text correct. So that now plays correctly with the correct text, and the duplicated elements are as before. So you just put in your new text there. The thing to remember when duplicating like this, track keyframe values at the end of an event will propagate along the timeline until the next keyframe. So to avoid undesirable results, it's good practice to place non-keyframed events on a new track. So that's another way of achieving the same kind of animation shown in episode 3, which involved a nested timeline. This method is suitable for users of Movie Studio Platinum, which doesn't support nested timelines. In episode 5, I'll be demonstrating how to create a title with horizontal scrolling text elements. So join me for that if you can. Until then, bye for now.